Hey, it's Drybear. And today we have a very important topic, something that I get asked a lot on stream and in comments, and since over the last few days, we've been focusing on how to gear your character and how to improve the power of your character. Today we're going to be talking about the enchanting system, or re-rolling stats on your gear to make them better. But first, you should come hang out with me on my live stream. I'm live every single day on twitch.tv/Drybear. If you don't come hang out with me and the community, the next time you prepare food and sit down to watch your favorite streaming service, as your food is warm and ready to eat, it's going to start buffering. You'll have to make that decision whether you're going to eat it while you wait or put the food aside and try to fix the video that won't play. All right, so I've been in this very insane, expensive cycle of constantly respeccing. I basically have been, my goal right now is to go through every class and spec in the entire game and make an endgame build for every theme, every thematic, every gameplay element. And I'm working my way through Necromancer right now, which means that I respec and rebuild my character 5, 6, 7 times a day. And I spend all of my time farming gear and almost none of it doing leveling content or anything else. It's all about the gear and the progression itself. And so often, many times a day, I have to replace an item on a specific slot. I have to re-roll the stats on a slot, or I'm looking at items that drop and I look at every single yellow that I get while doing content to see if it's something that could be viable for a build that I'm trying to make. So people ask, how do you know if an item is good? And I posted a video on that yesterday, going over what the stats are for each slot, how to know if an item is good, but also a lot of questions spawn from that saying, okay, how do you know an item is good if it has a bad stat on it? And how do I know that I can start using this system to make my items better? So I recommend watching that video first. How do I know if my item is good? Because it'll explain all the stat slots and all the availables. And for this video, I'll assume that you already know exactly how that works. But there's going to be a pool of available stats for each slot that is available for the item when it drops. And you need to know what this is so that you can know whether or not it's a good item. Something that people don't realize is that the items that are in defensive slots, like boots, legs, chest, and helm, won't really be rolling your most important damage stats. And so if you're trying to get critical strike chance or vulnerable damage on a defensive item, it's not going to be there, and you'll miss a good item that's super valuable. If you're looking for things like cooldown reduction, it'll drop on helm, on offhand, and on the amulet. So if you're looking for cooldown reduction on your boots, it's not going to be there. So you have to know what the available stats are to know if it's good. At the highest level of rarity, you will get 4 available stat slots that will appear on the item, plus 1 inherent item stat that appears above that gray line. That is based on the type of item and the type of weapon. So for example, two-handed swords will always have critical strike damage listed on them. That's why I'm using it for my current Bone Spirit build that I'm working on. And then boots will have specific evade benefits based on which one you want, either multiple charges of evade. Evade has a shorter cooldown when you deal damage, or gives you movement speed, things like that. But say you know what the stats are, you've already looked up what stats can drop on each item, and you're looking for a specific spread of stats on an item, and you find something that's close. So for example, this helm has percent total armor, maximum essence, poison resistance, and dexterity. I'm running a bone build, which means dexterity will give me crit, which is pretty good. Maximum essence is amazing for bone builds, and in general, total armor is one of your best damage reduction stats. I'll probably put a video out on this soon, but in general, resistances are pretty poor. They don't scale very well, and they probably do need a buff in defensive, but damage reduction while close, and total armor are some of your best stats. So when you look at an item like this, it drops, it lands on the ground, and you pick it up, and you look at it and you say, okay, I like maximum essence, that fits my build. Total armor works really well for my build. Dexterity gives me critical strike chance, which is pretty good, especially for an item slot that doesn't normally have offensive stats on it. And it's got poison resistance, which I could take or leave. It even has a minimum roll on it. So it's not a perfect item, but 3 out of the 4 stats that are on here are actually pretty good. And I would use this and imprint a legendary power on it. So your next step when you say, Drybear, how do I make my items better, is to find the occultist in main towns. Just press T, go to the main town, find the occultist. It has this triune looking symbol on it. You go to the occultist, and on the top left, you can see the very last tab that's available here on the occultist is going to be enchant item. You click here and you will be able to replace 1 affix on the item forever. So when we click this and we have this helm here that has 3 out of the 4 stats I'm looking for, Dexterity could be better, but poison resistance we definitely want to replace because there are better options for defense. You can put it in here for the enchant, and you can re-roll this one of these stats to make it better. Now, there's a couple tricks to be known here, things that I've learned the hard way many, many times that I'd love to pass on to you. Firstly, you can only replace one slot of that stat, which means that if you have these 4 options available, and I say I want to replace poison resistance, the other 3 stats then become locked to that item. You cannot make your choice later. You can keep re-rolling the stat that's in this slot, but these other 3 will never change. You cannot make that choice ever again. It will only be the slot that you choose. And you can keep re-rolling this infinitely as many times as you want. So let's see what we get. We've got max essence, total armor, and dexterity. Pretty good for what we're wanting, but we don't want poison resistance, so we're going to get rid of it. It'll bind it to your account and make it untradeable. We accept, and then it'll roll again, and our options are we can add cold resistance of the same value, or crowd control duration, or no change. You won't get anything back for no change. It just means that this is the best of the 3. Of this, I mean, I guess we can do crowd control duration. None of these really matter all that much. So we re-rolled it, and now that is going to be there. We now have another option to re-roll again, but you notice that the price has gone up significantly, almost 5 times the amount of gold. So we can spend this and roll again, and we roll again, and we get life regeneration while not damaged recently, or crowd control duration. It's a much higher value, so you can see that when we re-roll this, we make the value better. So 5% crowd control duration to 11%. Let's say we take it. That's pretty cool. So it went up again, not as big this time, but we still have this. Also keep in mind that re-rolling this enchant costs Forgotten Souls, which is a Helltide exclusive resource. If you watch my video from last week where I talk about Helltide being one of the most important endgame activities, then you'll understand why this is so important. Every time you re-roll an enchant on this, it's going to cost you a Helltide resource. The same thing goes for like upgrading your gear to max, so you can actually have value out of that. It requires Helltide resources, so anytime Helltide is up, consider going and doing it. It's super important. You can get good gear from it. Helltide's one of the best things you do. Let's roll it one more time. We've got this extra here. So we get a lower roll on crowd control duration, or we can get 3 ranks of Decrepify, which we're not using in this build, so we can just say no change. You can see how you can keep rolling this and eventually get very good stats that you want on this item. You can see how it's even marked. The little bullet icon next to the stat has changed, letting me know that I'm re-rolling it. And you can keep doing this infinitely. The prices will keep getting higher and higher and higher the more you do it. It'll get into the multi-millions. I have some items that are over like 10 million gold for re-rolling, and I just leave them as is because I can't I can't be arsed to put that in there. So as you go higher and higher, you can replace it. So that's kind of the big thing, is knowing that you have these stats available to re-roll, and when you get an item, you know that like one of the stats can be bad, right? So for example, with this boot, I'm running a Bone Spirit build. Movement speed on boot is really good, and it rolled almost the maximum value. Intelligence gives a skill damage scaling, which is great, especially for burst builds. And then it has a resistant on it, which we can re-roll into something else. So we can keep re-rolling this until we get something good. And when we get something good, plus 3 ranks to Corpse Tendril, now all of a sudden we have a shorter cooldown on Corpse Tendril, and we have 2 ranks of Bone Spirit and movement speed and intelligence. These boots are now insanely good for what I'm trying to use them for. So that leads me to my next point. If you've been watching my videos and keeping up with the information I've been giving you, where you're paying attention to yellows, you're aware of what stats can drop on specific items, you're holding on to yellows, the next part of that to making your items better is I would highly recommend spotting and scouting yellows that you like and re-rolling them while they're yellow. For 2 reasons. There's 2 reasons why I give you this advice. The first is that it is significantly cheaper to roll it when it's yellow, because the cost of re-rolling and enchanting an item is lower based on the rarity of the item. I learned this way too late. It's almost embarrassing, but if you re-roll a legendary, it's going to be significantly more expensive, and it's going to cost you more resources. You can see that this one costs a lot more. It has been re-rolled before, but it also costs multiple Helltide resources and a lot of gold. If you re-roll a yellow item, it's going to cost you less. The second reason that you want to do this, re-rolling yellow first, is because sometimes you just get bad luck. So if I get a decent item that has good stats on it, and it has maybe 2 or 3 of the stats that I want, but 1 or 2 bad ones, and I re-roll it, say I re-roll it like 8 or 9 or 10 times and it's still garbage, then I can just toss the item. It's going to get too expensive to re-roll it. I'm not hyper invested in it. I've just been re-rolling it. Versus if you have like a really good legendary with all the right stats and you put a max roll aspect on it, like you get your aspects in here that are super high value. I've been collecting, basically if I find a max roll or close to max roll, I collect it even if I'm not going to use it right that moment. Main reason is because they're hard to come by. So you want these max rolls laying around for when you want to change build or do something. But if you use an aspect on a yellow item, that aspect is gone forever. You cannot re-extract it from the item ever again. You can't get it back. It's gone. So the 2 reasons why I recommend rolling on yellow items before you upgrade them is 1, you can save yourself some gold and resources, and 2, if the item gets bricked, which means that you roll it a boatload of times and it still isn't giving you what you want, and it gets to some of these items. I have to go find the item. I think it's about a main hand wand that I have that has insanely high cost. It's to the point where it's almost untenable. It would have to be near perfect for me to continue rolling it. It's like almost 10 million gold per button press. It's ridiculous. But at that point, that item becomes untenable, right? It's too expensive to keep rolling it, and it'd be much cheaper to find an item that's similar or even slightly better and start re-rolling on that when the price is low. So if you're asking me, Drybear, how do I make my items better? Look for 3 out of the 4 stats that you need or stats that work for you. Then on yellow, re-roll it as yellow until you can make it really good. If you can, imprint onto it a good legendary to make it better. If you can't, try to find another yellow item to make that work. So that is kind of the theory, the philosophy that I've been using to respec multiple times a day and not lose crazy progress and still be able to make good quality builds. So that's Enchanting. Hopefully that clears it up for you and makes it much easier for you to understand and passes on some wisdom that I've learned through making many mistakes that might help your gameplay improve quite a bit. If you found value in the video, leave a like down below, leave a comment. It helps me with the algorithm, helps this video get seen by more people. And of course, come by my live stream. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have or just chat with you about the game or just kind of hang out with you as you grind and push forward. See ya. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.